Let's continue with our special week of horror. Today, we're gonna be talking about Edgar Allan Poe, a writer, poet, critic, and editor from the US, known for his horror short stories and his gothic novels. With a gloomy and very innovative style at the time, he marked the first steps of today's horror and detective novels. Don't forget to subscribe if you want more Halloween videos. He was born on January 19, 1809 in Boston, Massachusetts. When Edgar was only 2 years old, his dad abandoned his family. A bit later, his mom died, leaving Poe with his brother and sister orphan. The three of them were separated, and Poe was adopted by the Allan family. John Allan was a successful tradesman, so Edgar didn't have any money issues while he was a kid, and he went to good schools. His stepmother, who couldn't have kids, always loved him and pampered him. However, the relationship with his stepfather was never really good. Since he was a kid, Edgar always enjoyed spending time reading English magazines he found in his dad's warehouse. And when he was only 14, he was already writing his own poems. Back then, Poe was a good kid, but not very sociable. At that time already, his macabre way of writing was already appearing. Poe enrolled at the University of Virginia when he was 17, and problems started then. His stepfather limited his money. Edgar was a big fan of betting and alcohol. He went into debt and had to leave college. Without money or a job, he decided to enlist in 1827 in the US Army. That same year, he published his first book, Tamerlane and Other Poems, credited only to a Bostonian, since his stepfather didn't want him to write and Poe didn't want to be discovered. This short collection of poems still dealt with all the typical themes in that period of time, and it was full of verses Edgar had written when he was a kid. Edgar's stepmom fell ill, but by the time he was able to go back home, Mrs. Allan was already dead. It was very painful for the poet. He moved with his grandma and his aunt. It was then that he published his second book, Alaraf, which contained the longest poem he ever wrote. According to Poe himself, he wrote it when he was 15. This collection of poems called the critic's attention, but not in a good way. The poems were too complicated. John Allan decided to make up with his son and got him a place to continue his studies in the military academy at West Point in 1830. The writer stood out in the classes he took, but his stepfather married again without telling him, and Edgar started fighting him constantly, until John simply cut off all contact with him. It was then that the poet was expelled from West Point due to his bad behavior. Poe didn't have any friends, didn't have a job, and was facing serious financial problems. He swallowed his pride and sent a letter begging his father for help, but he never got any. In 1834, Edgar's stepfather died and didn't include him in his will. The writer kept fighting to survive, and in 1835 he got a job as an editor for the art and literature magazine Southern Literary Messenger in Richmond. There, Poe built a reputation as a fierce critic, writing cruel comments about his contemporaries. His heartless critics earned him the reputation of being a tomahawk man. When he was 27, the poet married his cousin Virginia, who was only 13 years old. At some point during 1840, Edgar joined George R. Graham as a Graham's magazine editor. During the years Poe worked for the magazine, he published his first detective novel, The Murders in the Rue Morgue. This has been recognized as the first modern detective story, with a macabre tone in both the crimes in the story and the characters themselves. In 1845, Edgar published his first great horror story, The Raven. The poem is considered to be one of the most famous in US literature and one of the best and most horrifying in his career. In 1847, when he was only 24 years old, same age of her biological mom and his older brother when they died, his wife, Virginia, died of tuberculosis. Poe was devastated with pain after her death, and he was never in good health again. Allan Poe spent his last days in Baltimore. He was found in the streets raving and was taken to a hospital. During those days, he was never clear-headed enough to explain what had happened to him. In the end, he died on a Sunday, October 7, 1849. Since then, there has been a great mysticism around his death. In the beginning, people thought it had been caused by a brain congestion or his alcoholism. But no cause is actually accurate, since his death certificate never appeared. His death still remains a great mystery. Edgar Allan Poe is considered as one of the best writers of short horror stories. Master of mystery and terror, he's still nowadays such a reference. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it. And if you want to see more Draw My Life videos, subscribe to our channel. See you in the next episode.